And we're live. Welcome to our series on World War I. This is episode 4. We're on to the second month of war. No end in sight, right, boys? I'm joined here today by MC and Farty.
Oh, oh
All
no,
right.
we'll be home by Christmas. We'll be home by Christmas.
Yeah, we will be, right? All right, so we have some naval engagements, and some of the trench warfare really starts to develop.
Yep.
And there's also a plane shot down, right? This is kind of an exciting month. So why don't you guys take it away and set up the background here?
Well, okay, let's go ahead and let me pull this up over here and show this timeline so that people can understand and see where we're pulling this data from, and they can check some of the stuff out themselves. Share screen. There we go. Can you see this? So this is from the Spartacus Educational, and we're going to start right here with the Battle of Higling. Okay. Now the Battle of Higling is a naval engagement, all right, that takes place early on, and the reason it's important, all right, is because it does two things. It solidifies in the people's minds the in the admiralty, right, of David Beatty. This is one of David Beatty's first battles, big battles. He's a vice admiral under Jellicoe, and he's an extraordinarily aggressive commander. All right, so people, of course, the way they're looking at this with Beatty is they're expecting this is the beginning of the war, the major naval engagement. Okay, so Beatty goes out, he's aggressively patrolling, and he comes upon 3 cruisers, all right, for the Germans. Now, he's got battle cruisers and the battleships with him. It's a lopsided engagement, all right, and you can see just from the routes that are taken, all right, that the Germans pretty much just get annihilated for all intents and purposes. It shows you that right here is where one of the German vessels sinks. This is the Mainz, which is, I believe, a destroyer. Up here is Cologne, which is a cruiser, and then you have the Adrian, or Ariandi, which is it retires leaving, but it actually sinks later on. And the British lose a single ship. The Germans lose, I believe, three cruisers and 1 destroyer in this engagement.
And this is kind of what starts to make the Germans more hesitant to put their what they think is a mighty navy out to fight the British directly, right? This is what.
Go ahead, Farty. You were saying something?
Oh yeah, no, this is more the surface vessels, not so much the submarines.
Correct.
Didn't Bismarck make a giant navy in preparation that he was all proud of, and then they end up just pretty much stuck at port for the whole war?
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that is one of the things that does happen. But this isn't really one of the reasons why that happens per se, because the Germans knew, all right, that their cruisers aren't a match for battle cruisers or battleships. All right, they're just not. A cruiser's not going to be a match for it at that time frame. It doesn't have the firepower to even go into there. What it does do in their minds, though, and you're correct, is that it puts it in mind that the British are still going to be extraordinarily active. They're willing to use their fleets, and they're going to be patrolling aggressively. So yes, it does lead to, okay, how are we going to use submarines? All right, where are we going to go to get submarines? The idea of how submarines can be used, they're of the opinion, right, that the submarines can be used as warships, as part of the warship fleet and fleet actions, not as separate wolf packs. That doesn't develop until much later. The problem, of course, is with a sub is it's not if it's going to stay with the fleet, it's got to be able to stay with the fleet. But it's the slowest moving, frame out there. It's not going to be able to keep up with these other ships, right? So you have to, if you're going to use them as part of a fleet action, as like a scouting force or so forth, then you have to know where the action is going to take place in order to pre-position your subs ahead of time, all right, in order for them to be effective at all, right? In order for their effectiveness to even be counted on. Well, on the ocean, there's no landmarks, all right, that tell you where you're at. Yeah, you can guess. You can go, okay, I think I'm within 6 miles of the coastline here, and you can become fairly accurate to a point there, but not from a battle perspective where you have to see the enemy. And that's something else. Back at this time, you don't have radar. You don't know where the enemy is unless the enemy, gives away its position and you triangulate it through radio, or you have sight. Okay, so if you can't see the enemy, you can't shoot the enemy. So pre-positioning your submarines, saying, okay, when the battle begins, the submarines will be here and we'll be ready to go, is kind of, the expectations don't match reality. They're not going to be be able to be used that way. Does that make sense? So basically, you have three surface, some small ships from the Germans. Well, I shouldn't say small. I mean, cruisers are fairly large, but I think the guns on the Germans were like 10-inch guns, thereabouts, against the 13-inch guns of the British, and they just got annihilated, right? But it was important because here's the hero. David Beatty is the hero, and look how successful he was. So, from that perspective, it's you can say it was an important battle. And it's early on where, okay, the British are puffing up their pride, saying, "Hey, we'll be able to take this." The Germans at this point, they were looking at, okay, it's a loss of 3 ships. It's a victory, but it's not a devastating victory that they were really that concerned about. So
yeah, no, absolutely. And I'll stop presenting you because you took that down. Okay, so but it could have gotten the British a little overconfident. It turns out they weren't overconfident. They did have the superior navy, but still, if the Germans, I don't know, they shouldn't have locked themselves up at that port. But that's later on.
well, what they should have done is they should have sortied, okay? And the purpose of the sortie should have been to get as many of their ships into the open ocean as possible. Now, you could do that, but the problem that the Germans had is longevity, right? We're talking World War I. We're not talking World War II. Okay, so why is that important? It's important because the major fuel for ships at this point, it's not oil. It's coal, right? Oil fire ships are just starting to come up and get developed. Coal is more important. If you're going to fight a battle from a coal burning ship, you need to have a place where you can load up with coal. Where can the Germans load with coal?
Yeah, and here's another misconception about the Americans helping out, in both world wars and all this kind of stuff, is that, oh yeah, so what? You Yanks went and sent some ships, at the beginning, but they were old coal boilers and stuff like that. Yeah, there was a reason for it, and it was more strategic than snubbing one's face at somebody else. But fucking yeah.
So at the beginning, it shows you that at the beginning of the war, how aggressive everybody was and how confident that both sides and every side was that they could deal with these situations. But the Germans, unlike World War II, where they tried to move the Bismarck out into the ocean and so forth, their reasoning for trying to do that with their own high seas fleet, they needed to be able to have it sail and then also be able to find places where it can get coal, it can get resupplied. You can't do that from tanker submarines, right? Which you do in World War II. You don't have that ability because coal is the fuel for these ships. Now, why? Another thing about this that's very important to remember: these are steam powered, coal. It's coal, yeah, burning, but they're burning it for steam, and these are steam ships. Why is that important? Because everyone gets the idea that it's just like today. You just hop on the ship and off you go, right? No, it doesn't work that way. Okay, they don't just take off. Okay, you're not just like with a diesel engine in your car. You hop in your car and you go. You've got to build up the heat in the steam. So when it comes to port and it parks and it turns off, the heat, then it's going to take, sometimes 4 or 5 hours to get the boilers going to where they can start steaming out into the ocean right away. All right, and that's true of the oil later on in World War II as well. But obviously it heats faster with oil than it does with coal.
Well, no, and also with coal-powered engines, you could see the smoke rising over the ocean pretty far, right? So you would know there was somebody out there, and if they're not yours and you don't have radio contact, it's the enemy, right?
Well, that's true, but both sides were very good about it. From the naval forces, both sides are very good about not speaking on the radio. Okay, from the ships to ship, they all understood the importance of radio discipline. The German High Seas Command, however, didn't have the same viewpoint. They felt that their traffic was encrypted, that their radio traffic, and as a result, the British, just like what happens in World War II, are able to listen in to the High Command's radio traffic back and forth. They had broken the German codes and knew, they were listening into the high level discussions. They may not know about an individual ship if it was given orders secretly, right, by hand, but if it came from the commanders, if it came from the high command, it was probably intercepted and decoded by the British. The British were well aware of most of the Germans' movements as a result. What they didn't have control over, of course, were the subs, because the subs were a different group and they were given their orders, basically by hand.
At this time, isn't Churchill the leader of the Royal Navy?
I don't know if Churchill is the first Sea Lord or not. What were you going to say though, Farty?
Yeah, I was just thinking it was funny because there's this thing with Germans and how their rules and shit work. Like, there's a fucking an anecdote from one of the monkeys from Top Gear. They were saying to the German, like, okay, so what happens in Germany if you get done for speeding? And it's like, well, you must not drive. And it's like, yeah, I know, but like, what happens if you get caught for it? It's impossible. You must not drive. You do not have a license. Kind of thing. But like, the whole point of that was like, yeah, but yeah, okay. But what happens if you do? I was thinking, wouldn't it be funny if the German hierarchy just went under the guise of these memos are secret. They're only for my eyes only, and that is how everyone will be with this.
That's very true. The German command, and this is something else that's very true too. That's a good point, and we should probably point this out. The ideas of the kind of discipline necessary to move troops and everything is for especially when we talk about large troops, is strict individual discipline to orders. There is no independent movement, independent initiative, or anything like that. There's it's really more you these are your orders, you obey the orders to the letter of the orders, right? And the result is you're going to see coming into this next battle, massive, and I mean massive casualties that people hadn't seen, all right, ever before. Even in the United States Civil War, you don't see the kind of casualties that take place, all right, in these battles that are going to be happening. And yes, I do believe that he was the first Lord of the Admiralty. Churchill was the first Lord of the Admiralty at the beginning, at this stage of the game. He remains part of the first in the Admiralty until I think 1915. Churchill does. So at the start, he is definitely part of that.
All right. So when does the first plane get shot down?
Well, the first plane is not shot down until the latter part of the month. Like I think it's in October. That's when the first aeroplane is actually shot down, if I'm not mistaken. But so what they're doing with planes at this point is they're just starting to use them for reconnaissance. Okay, and they're basically flying over. Both sides are flying over, you know, the land, right, and looking down, and then they're flying back with pictures. There's literally a guy there with an old style, camera in his hands. You know, those ones that have the little the little square levers all around it and everything, right?
Yeah, that's
they
they
are,
had 2-seat planes, right? That way the guy in the back could be the photographer and capture.
so sometimes it's the pilot who's just leaning out over, while he's trying to fly the plane to try and snap pictures of what's going on. Literally, people are leaning out, taking pictures with their camera, and then flying back for it to get developed, which is then, of course, taken over to the the headquarters. And the first aircraft that's shot down is October 5th. So, but the Battle of the Marne now, all right, the lines, the counterattack is that everyone's been waiting for against the Germans, right, as they move through Belgium, begins at the Battle of the Marne. And it happens, the Battle of the Marne happens because the Germans they're trying to push the von Schlieffen plan, but it's not going the way they expected to. They've had to, in the West, change their troops, okay, and send troops to the east, right, to help with the battles that's beginning for the Battle of Tannenberg against the Russians. So you've had 2 to 4 divisions are being taken away. And being put on trains and heading east. Meanwhile, the Germans are like, okay, we're trying. You remember, if you take a look at the von Schlieffen plan, you basically got this whole wing movement, right? Well, when you're moving a wing, in order to keep the lines together, the outer wing has to be traveling much faster than the inner wing, right? The inner pivot. And the Germans on the inner pivot get antsy because they're like, what the hell are we waiting for? We fight a little bit here. We've got the advantage. Let's go. And the Mokta, who's the German commander, trying to make sure that the wing travels as a wing, so it's always as a pressure of the wing, finally gives in and says, fine, screw it, go ahead. And he says, I think it's the first or one of the German armies on the interior of the wing, he says, go ahead and attack. And they do. And what does this create? This creates a flank for them to be attacked, which begins the Battle of the Marne.
Shouldn't the German commander know better? Even I know better, and I'm no military commander.
That's true, but it's hard when you're talking about large scale movements like this, and where you've got success. You have to try and always exploit success, and so it kind of turns into a guessing game.
Yeah, but when you turn your far end of the flank inwards and start to push on all sides and try and get them in a kill box instead.
If you try to push that part of the wing in, then you leave that end exposed to its own flanking movement by the enemy.
Even if you're out beyond, if you're already in a flanking maneuver, you're already out. Your lines are longer than theirs, then you can flank.
Yeah, but they're not in this case. In this case, in this case, both sides keep trying to push that way, which is creating this race to the sea that everyone talks about.
Okay, Fardy, go ahead and jump in here, because I'm sure you have some insight in this. Is it the German commander's fault, or is it the men being, well, green, right? Because they should know better as well.
Well, it's like it's a lot of everybody and everything in this, because it's like I keep maintaining, this is the first real one of these that we've ever had before. And before it was, just shake your noisy stick at the dark fella and they'll fucking run away. Now it's sort of shaky darky stick not working no more. What the fuck?
Go ahead, finish your thought. Sorry.
But yeah, and this wasn't just just with the British Commonwealth and all this kind of stuff. This was anybody who had an empire at the time, because that's basically all they've been doing for the previous 100 years was that as well. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to read the chat real quick, and then we'll discuss. I'm guessing this is the map of the battle you were talking about, so we'll dissect this. Eldritch God, he made a funny Snoopy reference also, but this is the better of the comments. I think the German commanders studied at the same school as the Game of Thrones season 3 commanders. I would say season 8, but yeah.
to an extent, I think everybody was coming from the Game of Thrones kind of viewpoint. So what you have here is a general counteroffensive that takes place. Okay, now if you'll notice, right here is the salient. This is where the wings become exposed, all right, by the Germans. Right, you'll notice the Germans have been trying to keep pressure along this entire line and actually take just a little bit of territory right here, but for the most part, they end up being forced to fall back. You'll also notice that you got the Crown Prince here. This is important because this is the Crown Prince of the Germans, and unlike many people, that get their titles and so forth because of the their rank has its privileges, and he was the son of the Kaiser, so therefore he probably doesn't know what he's doing. This guy knows what he's doing in war. This is someone who is who does live up to his reputation and is an excellent field commander. And that'll come in even more into the fore later, but it just shows you that he's not an inexperienced or inept commander.
Okay, I don't see the French First Corps first off, but okay, the Fifth Corps of the German Army, that's where the Crown Prince is. How far out towards Verdun do their lines extend? And is their force bigger than the Allied force on the other side?
Basically, they're around. They're like this around Verdun. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Because I'm wondering if the Prince would be able to push the Third French Corps back towards. Is that a river or a road?
This right here. Are you talking about this?
Talking about above Saint Desire, the blue line there, right next to the French Third Corps. That's a river? Then trap them against the river.
Okay, but you're on the other side of the river. You're trying to get across it. You got to remember, the Germans are trying to get across these rivers.
Well, no, the Fourth Corps is, but the Fifth Corps is on the same side of the river as the French Third.
Right, but if they push, then all of a sudden they're going to have to go across that river, which means they're going to have to try. Okay, understand this. If you're going to try and cross a river, right, or cross a bridgehead like this, how do you do it? Well, you form a bridgehead and then you funnel the troops through that bridgehead. In other words, you got to collapse the line from it being deployed horizontally to vertically, and then re-expand it again horizontally. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, but at the same time, though, you're pushing the French third against the river. They have to.
But if you attempt to sit up there and try and do that at the same time, try and maintain contact with the people against you, the other forces along the edge, all right, you're going to open up holes. It's not as easy as you think to try and get prepared to prepare for that. All right, they could have pushed the Third Army back this way, but all it would have done is just extended his lines and made even a more difficult problem, all right, for himself from a flank perspective.
Wait a minute, these aren't corps like in the Civil War. These are entire armies.
Yep.
These are entire armies. This is a lot of men. Okay, we're not talking 10,000 men here. Okay, you're talking hundreds of thousands of men in this battle. This is close to 1 million men right here on this side, and close to 1 million men on the other side.
Well, no, and to everybody watching and who is going to watch, we had just wrapped up our Civil War series a month and a half ago. So I'm used to saying corps and stuff like that. So bear with me a little bit here, guys. I'm going to have to open the perspective up from the corps to the whole army.
So you can see where I was saying it's much larger than the Civil War.
Yes, and the casualties for this 2-day battle are going to bear that out. All right, but we'll get to that. So what you have with this counteroffensive is you have now what's interesting is this is one of the few times you actually get worthwhile support between the French and the British. Okay, the British initially were right here. This is the expeditionary force. It's fairly small in comparison. If you remember, it's been through the Battle of Le Mans. They fought a delaying action down to here. Now they're going to turn and go on the attack. The French understand this and also are worried about the British if they push through, all of a sudden being surrounded with their flanks in the open. So they've added additional support out here to try and maintain that flank. And the battle begins. And this is a defense. The Germans have strong defenses, all right, and it roils back and forth. And you can tell right through here, very little ground is given or achieved, with the exception of right here. You at least get close to a pushback of about 20 to 30 kilometers.
Just a second, your cursor isn't showing up, so if you could fix that, or either that or say names.
Is this better?
There we go. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, what you end up with here is you see. This is only like 2 kilometers worth of battlefield. Here is about 5, right, of where the lines are, which is the solid dash line is the beginning of the line, and the smaller dash line here is the ending where the lines were at the end of the battle at the end of the next day. You can see very little is achieved here, with the exception of here and the British Expeditionary Force, where they do a massive job, a hell of a job, pushing back the Germans back into this front. Okay, the French casualties for this battle are 200,000 men, just on the French alone.
Mm-hmm.
The number of dead are 80,000 dead French. The British, being a different style of force, all right, their casualties are close to 20,000, with approximately 1,700 dead. So for the British, it's not as bad. The Germans are approximately 250,000 casualties.
And the okay, what is the point of this battle though? What are they trying to achieve? They're trying to take Paris. What are they trying to do here?
Well, the Germans are trying to take Paris.
That's what I'm asking. Is the Germans started this fight?
No. So well, the Germans are okay. The Germans are at a point, got to this point, and are basically stuck at this point. Right. This is why this is actually a counterattack by the French and the German French and the British forces. Why are the Germans in this situation? Because, like every other time, when you go too fast, when you have initial success, you can outrun your logistics. and the Germans have outrun their logistics chain, and so they're waiting for resupply. And while there was a respite for resupply, the French attacked.
Okay, fair enough. I'm guessing they didn't just sit there while they were waiting. They've already started their trenches. These lines
Yes.
are the trench lines, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
these lines are these lines become, and in fact, this line here, this dashed line, as you see it, right across here, this more or less doesn't change. This just extends all the way to White's or Yeeps, depending upon how you want to pronounce it. And so forth. So these will become basically the front lines that don't really change much for the rest of the war until the very end of the war.
So we'll just reference this battle every now and then with casualty rates as we move forward.
It's basically, yeah, you're gonna see that. Now we'll go into the extensions and how it all gets down to where they set up their determinations for the battles of Yeeps and so forth, and then we'll start talking about the Battle of Yeeps and as that goes through. But yeah, this is going to become basically the battles for the entire time.
On the Russian front, what is happening this month?
Okay, for the Russians, well, it's a little, it's kind of like a mixture of things. Here, let me share this one. There you go. This is on the eastern side. All right, what you initially have is, remember, you had the Battle of Tannenberg, right? And you see now the Germans basically push the northern part of the Russian armies back dramatically. Okay, down here in their southern part of the battles, their intention, of course, the Russian intention is to break through the Austrian lines, right, and be able to attack, so they can get into place where they can attack or support rather the Serbians, who are, for all intents and purposes, surrounded. Right, the Serbians are down here, and then they're more or less surrounded by Austria-Hungary, which is now, in the basically trying to reduce Serbia, right, and starve it into submission and battles. So the Russians come in with this mass attack, right, from its southern forces. Remember, they have a lot of men, okay, but they don't use them very well, and in fact, this is the Battle of Galicia, the Galician battles. The Fourth Army and the Third Army here, right, almost get completely destroyed, all right, by the Austrians. All right, they're able to gain here on the southern part of the third, and the third and the Second Army is actually able to push the Austrians back. But up in here, the Austrians have success, and for all intents and purposes, all right, are able to destroy the first army. Although in the process of doing that, it basically allows the Fourth Army to escape in order to then at which point both sides, now neither side is entrenching down here. This is one of the odder parts at the beginning of the wars, is you're starting the entrench works here. So this is kind of a nice fluid battle. Another thing that this doesn't really show is there's a lot of cavalry action here. There's a lot of people actually riding horses back and forth, and there are cavalry battles throughout this portion of the line. People on horseback.
So as the Germans push forward and the Russians start to retreat, we're in August, right? But still,
Austrians. This is the Austrians. The latter part of August, first part of September.
Okay, so yeah, if I'm the Germans, get them on the run, take a couple cities, secure, resupply, wait for next summer.
Well, but you got to remember, the idea was to push them back is not easy to do because they don't have the forces. You got to remember where the Germans really were. This is just an Eighth Army. Remember, you had how many of those armies you saw there? Here's the size of one of the German armies. Here, Does it make sense?
Well, no, it makes sense, but they've already taken some cities as the Russians have retreated, right? You could get a line and
Well,
supply.
you basically reestablished at your borders. These are German borders right here.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know. I'm just saying, do not invade Russia in the winter. Don't do it ever.
Yeah, but that's assuming that the Russians aren't going to do anything. Now, what else is going on? All right, so this battle is taking place. You see the battle takes place, and then you see the fact that initially the Austrians have a great success, but they then have to retreat back because they can't keep supply lines. They're basically got a flank right out here that they can't defend. So they retreat back down into this line, and this becomes the stabilized line that we're going to see later on.
Okay, so Tsar Nicholas is not running the Russian army as of yet. Are the Russians worried yet? Because everything falls apart later in the war. We all know this.
Are they worried yet? Well, I mean, they're worried about the northern part of the army because of the losses that they took. So from the southern perspective, no, they weren't really worried. But then, of course, if you take a look at the timeline, what do you notice? You notice Turkey joins the powers. So Turkey becomes involved in this. All right, so now the border for the border lines are going to be extended even more against the Russians, because now you got the entire where the Russians were bordering the Ottoman Turks. Now is going to become a battlefront as well. The other thing that happens at this point is the Canadians begin to arrive in Europe.
Are they polite?
They're Canadians.
No, actually, I heard the Canadians put a pretty good force out to the field in World War I and II for that matter.
For their size. Yeah, you can say that it's out there. I mean, but you got to remember that there in Canada today there's about 30 million Canadians total, right? The British Isles have over 60 million, right? It was even worse back then, where the British Isles probably had about 30 million, and you probably had about 1 million in the entire, Great White North.
Then why exactly couldn't we just annex Canada years ago?
We could have. We didn't. Do you want the Canadians?
And then they can go back to Britain. They can go back to Britain and France. The natives can stay. I just want all the oil.
No greed there. No American greed being shown at that point now, is it?
Yeah, really. Like, hey, welcome. You're now all American. Oh, wait, no, you're not. I'm kidding. Here's your deportation papers.
So we're back at the timeline. All right. You've had a number of like I said, the number of the battles that are taking place. These are all part of the other battles that are taking place as the race to the sea begins. And all these are meeting engagements where both sides sit down, and then you end up with the first battle of Ypres, right? Which I promised Jensen I wouldn't get into the Battle of Ypres until he's available for it, because he wants to talk about it, because he has relatives that survived that portion of it.
And he also wants to make sure you don't fuck up the bloody pronunciation of it.
You gotta love it when the Aussie tells Americans how to talk. But all right, so the political landscape, since we got about 15 minutes left, politically, everybody's still yay, war, it'll be quick, home by Christmas, nothing to look at here, right?
Up to the Battle of Marne, yeah. When the casualty lists for the Battle of Marne come out, it starts to sober people up, because these were massive armies and so forth. For the British, not so much, because the British casualties are I mean, they're horrible, but not they're not 80,000 dead like the French. They're not 250,000 men yet.
Yeah,
Okay,
and in America, because I know we don't join the war for another year and a half. I get it, but still, we're just sitting back watching and hoping our ships, we still get to do trade, right? The
right.
political climate in America is keep us out of the war.
The United States is this is a European problem. Okay, there's let me stop this here. There's a real issue from the U.S. perspective. One, many people, of course, all right, have ancestry both on the French side and the English side, but also there are a number that trace their roots to Germans. There's a significant German population, all right, or I shouldn't say population, but there's first and second generation immigrants from Germany, and they are opposed to the war. All right, fighting against the Germans. Well, while some people who have ancestries from Great Britain, yeah, but we've always had that. But we fought against the British, so the feelings aren't exactly the same. In addition, okay, it is France, so there's an idea behind this saying, you know what, that's their problem. Let them handle it. The other aspect is because Americans are very myopic. Okay, there is no understanding that why are they fighting over the Archduke? Where's all this coming from? Why are they even at war? What were they doing that caused this war? Who the hell are the Serbs? Right? Everyone's like, who are the Serbs? Nobody knows who the Serbs are. Nobody cares about the Serbs. Why is there a reason for fighting? A lot of Americans really never understood the beginnings of World War One, the feelings that were involved, the and so forth. They're like, that what the hell, man? They're like, there's no understanding of why these major armies would be moving. All right, and so they're like, well, let them handle it. Let,
Well,
let them let them fight it out.
we now know that most warfare in the 20th century onwards has just been there so Americans can learn geography.
And it's not working real well, as a matter of fact. But yeah, from the American perspective, most Americans at this point don't. They're not even worried about this. That's a European problem. You also got to remember though this as well. The United States is looking at this the same way they looked at it in 1870 in the battles that took place from that point. We battle in the United States, they can battle in Europe. There's no reason for the United States to get involved. All right, there's no reason that we have to be, talked about. So why is the U.S. going to be involved? Now it is crippling some of the trade. Okay, but the British do something very wise, which is if they capture an American merchant ship that's headed for Germany with quote unquote embargoed goods, they seize it, but they pay for it as well. They say it's ours now. It just wasn't going to Germany anymore.
So
So,
they seized the cargo, send the ship back to the U.S., but paid.
well, to an extent, yeah, they pay for the cargo. It delays the ship. It isn't as profitable for the Americans to do it like this. But at the same time, it's not as devastating. I mean, it keeps them from being really truly upset about. Okay, well, I lost the cargo, but at least they're paying for some of it, and my ship eventually gets released. I'm not making as much money as I think I should, but they're at least paying me to do this.
Yeah, and then the Germans start sinking our ship.
The Germans are like, well, what the hell, man? If you're not going to deliver the cargo, nobody gets it. Well, why should they get cargo and we don't? So ships start getting sunk.
Yeah, but I mean, either one is kind of a violation of Something. It has to be a violation of something to seize an American ship with no cause. That has to violate something. But
Well,
I
I mean,
think
it is an embargo. It is a
we don't have
it is
to
regulation.
abide by your embargo. Who are you to tell us we can't sell to Germany? Wouldn't that be the American point of view?
And they were the ones saying we're the ones with the guns.
Yeah, well,
this is a blockade. We're the ones with the guns. If you don't like it, bring your own guns.
we could have.
Yes, we could have. All right, we could have. The American fleet combined with the German fleet could have basically have broken the blockade. That's true.
Not necessarily. See, what a lot of people don't understand about the U.S. Navy at the time was that they were really great for parades and whatnot. They could stand at attention, they could look very nice, get their spacings all together, and they could shoot their guns in a very regimented manner and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, that might work well on the parade ground, but over in the North Sea, where there's a thing called waves that sort of tend to throw the boat around a little bit.
We don't need to go. We don't need to go into the North Sea, though.
You ended up having to. But if you'd gone to war with England, where do you think they're going to, they're not going to go over to nice and safe bloody, the nice and safe bloody American Atlantic where there's hardly any waves. No, fucking bring them out here where the weather will take
Where
you.
are you going to get your supplies? All of a sudden now you don't have any merchant ships landing on the British Isles.
Well,
Yeah, I think you'd sooner or later see United States flag flying above the palace.
Not necessarily.
I don't think we could have invaded. I really don't think we could have invaded. All right, but that doesn't mean that wouldn't have crippled the British economy. It would have significantly crippled the British economy and to be honest, the French economy. All right, but the reality is we were still very allied with the French. There's still a lot of good feelings for the French. Right, Americans still remember, still being taught the Revolutionary War how the French had helped us against the British. So could we have done that? Yeah, but really, is it that big a deal for U.S. merchant ships to be being paid for? You're trading. You may not trade the way you want to. Your profit margins might not be as big as they were, but they are doing it. And you also have to remember that respect for the British blockade also meant that when we blockade nations, the British would respect our blockades as well. And this is important, right? The British didn't end the blockade against the South during the Civil War.
Yeah, but we had plans drawn up to invade Canada for sure, and then other battle
we did.
British.
We did have plans just in case if War Plan Red ever needed to be put into effect. They would have done it, and if that would have been the case, I still think then if the British then would try to save Canada, because with ships, it would have reduced the overall superiority of the British fleet, because they would have had to try and defend the British Isles from two sides simultaneously, and they would have been in a pinch.
Yeah, and we wouldn't necessarily want the Isles. Let Germany have that. We want Canada. Link Alaska up with the mainland.
Yeah, well, okay, but do we really want the Canadians? I'm telling you, man, we don't want the Canadians. You got to remember, during the Revolutionary War, where did a lot of the loyalists go? A lot of the loyalists, all right, fled to Canada. They didn't go to the British Isles. They actually fled to Canada. So do you want to take them back? Do you really?
No, I figured they would do the same thing, and they would run this time to the Isles. We'd get rid of them completely. Trudeau would be the Prime Minister of fucking Britain. Could you imagine?
People call me the imperialist.
I don't know. I just like the idea of having all those maple mines, right, Eldritch? That's what he's saying in the chat. We needed those maple mines.
At that point in time, we did. Now, Fardy's right about the U.S.'s Navy preparations against the British Navy. It would not. We don't. Our fleet was not superior to the British fleet at that point in time.
No.
However, what he's ignoring is the fact that if we went on a war footing, production of U.S. warships would have increased dramatically. And even if they weren't superior, we could definitely build more of them.
Yeah, well, you'd still take like my point more was you'd still take huge, massive more losses because your ships aren't used to fucking firing when the water's moving.
That's true. We would have taken more, but when your allies are the Germans and you're both working against it, how long is the British fleet going to last? It's a little different when you have allies that have a powerful fleet of their own. And while the Germans didn't have as many battleships, their battleships, let's be perfectly frank, battleship to battleship, the German battleships were equivalent.
Well, that would be interesting too. If the British had the sinking of American ships policy instead of capturing, we would end up going to war with the British. But then, I don't know. Would Mexico still try and go to war with the U.S.? Because there was a plan for Mexico because that's what gets us into the war. Is that
Well, was there a plan to do that? The Germans would love to have happened, but the reality was that the Mexicans were no threat to the United States.
Do you think the British made that up?
No. The British didn't make it up. That's just the Germans trying to get the Mexicans to do something stupid. Were the Mexicans ever going to do something like that stupid? No. But you can see from a diplomatic cable that the Germans would like that to have happened.
That would be interesting. U.S. would be all of Canada, all of Mexico. It would be huge.
That would also mean you'd have to call yourself a Mexican as well.
No, they would just be Americans.
They would be Americans if we did it that way. But if we'd wanted to take the Mexicans and kept them as Mexicans, we could have done it in the 1850s.
Yeah, we had taken Mexico City, so we could have just kept it, but that would have made the South too strong. That's why they didn't. But anyway, that's a whole different war, a whole different time.
Fucking poor tradesman blames his tools.
No, but the United States was not along those lines. It was not imperialistic along those lines. Against, non-aligned, just Indian tribes and native tribes, that was one thing, because they looked upon it as the land being unoccupied. All right. Actually taking land from another nation, though, all right, if you ever take a look at even the Mexican-American War, the land that was taken was, New Mexico, Arizona, and even then it was paid for. All right, the Americans then said, okay, you can't have this anymore because you don't, because you've lost it, but we'll pay you a certain amount for this land. All right, after the fact. So.
How nice of us. We stole it and then paid them for it.
Well, I mean, it's either that or let them continue to have it and then constantly attack us again and again.
Well, it's not theft if you even offer to pay.
It's not a matter of offer to pay. We did pay an indemnity for it.
We had offered to pay them for it. They told us to bugger off. We said, okay, now we're going to war.
Yeah, it's when Dodge said, "Oh, we steal it off you, then we'll pay it for you later." It's not theft if you pay for it.
That's true to a point, and we did try to pay for the territory ahead of time. Although, but the Mexicans were not just ignoring things; they were causing problems that led to the Mexican-American War because they wanted Texas back. You got to remember the flashpoint was Texas. But that's a separate war.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
keep the World War One.
We keep reverting back to the wars we know more about. MC, it's a problem.
Well,
No.
there is what has happened though is the border with Mexico is very unsettled, and there are border skirmishes that are taking place with the Mexicans. Pershing was sent down, all right, from the United States to deal with the Pancho Villa and his group. All right, so we had open warfare to some degree. Granted, it was low level intensity, but we had an open warfare with the Mexicans prior to World War One taking place, and recently in the 1900s it was. So the idea that the Mexicans would attack us from the perspective from the American perspective at that time, all right, is yeah, they may attack us. They may be willing to attack us because they've been willing to attack us in the past. We'll just have to finish them off this time.
Typical bloody Americans of bloody stream about the European war, and they've got to go and make it all about themselves.
Yup. Just wait till we enter the war, then we get to talk about us directly.
Well, I mean, but that's not going to happen for another because you have an election that has to take place and so forth. So at this point now, what you're seeing is the lines begin to stabilize. All right, and okay, so the stabilization is taking place. What do you do now? Right. This is what people start coming up with these ideas. Okay, the casualties are horrific on both sides. It's not 5,000 here. It's literally tens of thousands of men dead, hundreds of thousands wounded.
Well, yeah, no, and what do you do now? Well, sneak peek to the future of the war, they develop gas. That's nice.
You do see them trying to do certain things, but the Germans are basically okay once the Western Front from their perspective was stabilized. They say, okay, now it's time to deal with the Russians, and so they start massing, all right, for the battles against the Russians. What delays them, and you're going to see this in a little bit, is the weakness of their allies, the Austro-Hungarians and of course the Turks. And you're going to, as a result, though, you're also going to see the British attempt to try and pivot in that direction as well.
What's Italy doing at this point? Aren't they still kind of staying neutral?
At this point, they're still neutral. They don't join the war until next year, until the 1915s, in May of the 1915. So they're just kind of sitting back, going, okay, we'll see which way the wind's blowing, and then we'll try and attack.
But typically, everybody's typically thinking the Italians are on the Austro-German side, but no one's actually thinking that they're going to do anything of any use.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Well, and that's the thing. If Italy was smart, they would see these casualty reports, look at their population, and go, "Nope, I'm noping right out of this one."
It probably would have been better for them to have stayed out of the war, but they got greedy. They thought that would be an easy win. They could snatch up some of the Austro-Hungarian Empire as it begins to fall apart. It's quite duplicitous, okay, and they pay the price for it because their casualties are just their ineptitude and their casualties is just it's horrendous. It's just absolutely horrendous. I mean, they attack at Caporetto, what was it, 18, 19 times? 19 times you move major armies in there in an attempt to capture a strategic point that you're for all intents and purposes never able to capture until everything is coming to run down at the end. They spent literally millions and millions of lives in that.
So I have a question. Has anybody tried this hard seltzer stuff? I guess one was left in the rooms, and my wife brought it back to me. White Claw hard seltzer, 5% mango. I don't know. Spiked sparkling water. Weird.
I've never even heard of it.
I know. I'm kind of scared.
It's a fizzy lolly.
A fizzy lolly, but that's all the further I want to go for today as far as World War One, because I don't want to talk about the Battle of Life or Yeats until next week.
Yeah, absolutely. We will wait for Jensen for that one. So thank you everybody that came out and watched this, and anybody that will later. And look, I think we made it through the whole episode without me cussing up a storm. That's the first.
Oh, shit.
Hey, stop it! I'm kidding. But tomorrow I'm planning on talking about the EU elections if I have a panel. So we will see you guys. See you at 3:00 on the West Coast tomorrow, 6 in New York, and you figure out the other times from there. Good night, good luck, and well, go. Hopefully Sargon won. Yeah, right. Bye.